Hello, nerds. Welcome to Monday Night Nerd. It is Monday. It is 7 o'clock, and we are on live on YouTube. For Monday Night Nerd, we are going to be talking all about comic books that have made it to the small screen. We're going to talk about the best comic book TV shows of all time. In my opinion, it's my list, so we're going to talk all about that. And I hope you're doing well. Akari is in chat, actually here on time today. I greatly appreciate it. Pretty Nerdy Crystal and Boomster Joe are in chat as well. Thank you all for joining me on Monday night. We have a whole bunch of different news stories to talk about, so we're going to get through those, and then we're going to jump into the main event. I have been out of commission for the past few days. Tuesday, I was doing some stuff in the backyard, and I decided to forget about 5th grade gym class, and I decided I should lift something really heavy with my back and not with my legs. I felt something pull, and I almost hit the ground because I was in so much pain. I have been on a heating pad and had wraps and stuff around me for the past 5-6 days. I'm feeling a bit better today. I'm probably at a 10. I'm like at a 3, depending on what I'm doing. But I have been pretty not doing a lot for the past few days. Being old is so fun, says Crystal. Yeah, it has not been fun. However, I will give you all a tip, and people like Crystal will probably be able to echo this statement. I was sitting on the couch. I was in a lot of pain. Like, sitting on the couch hurts because it's sitting on your tailbone. But my wife looked over at me and she said, "Would you like a Midol?" And I went, "What is a Midol?" I knew what a Midol was. I've picked them up before. For the guys in the chat who don't know what Midol is the pills that girls take when they have period cramps. And I don't care how much of a bro you are, these suckers work. I don't care. You guys have been hiding this stuff on us for long enough. I'm telling all the guys, if you got pain, take a Midol. It worked so fast and worked so well. So thank you, Hun, for the little boost there of getting me at least a little bit of relief for a little while. It lasted only a couple hours, but it was sorely needed when I was. Next podcast, Mike gets hooked up to the period simulator. No, Mike does not get hooked up to that. Mike had my wife picked me up because I like getting massages. I love having my shoulders worked on. My wife picked up like those sticky pads with the machine that like pulsates. I had that on like a 2 on my neck and shoulders, which are usually stiff. And I was like, no, I can't wear this. This is way too sore. So no, I do not want to know what you girls go through. I completely understand and have so much sympathy and empathy for you. That you can ask my wife if you ever meet her. Anytime she is going through anything like that, I'm like, whatever you need. You want me to go get you food? You want me to give you a back rub? I don't care. I will take care of you because I could just imagine what that is like. So I'm feeling a bit better today. I wish I could do more. I did get a little bit of stuff done. We have the on-air sign up in front of Ghost Rider. I added a new shelf. I realize now that shelf is not level at all. So there's a couple things I've been doing around the house. I did watch a movie, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. The one thing I do have to say, over the weekend, I went down to my local Princess Auto. If you don't know what Princess Auto is and you don't have one in your area, Princess Auto is a giant warehouse of tools and car stuff and stuff around the house. It's kind of you can get anything there pretty much. One in my area is moving. If you've been on the podcast before, you know that I told you my old Toys R Us is no longer there after only like a decade. They're opening a new Princess Auto in that location, which means the one that is just up the street, which is a little smaller, is closing. And I thought they would just be moving their whole stock over, but I, without realizing, went to Princess Auto on Saturday and everything in the store was 60% off. And it was packed in there. There were people with carts and carts and carts of stuff. Like I said, I just simply drove by and thought, I got a gift card, I should hop in and see what they've got. And I'm so glad I did. I picked up a new metal ruler, which I was needed for my cosplay, a nice long one, which I wish I had forever ago, a whole bunch of sandpaper. I picked up some tarp tape because I got some tarp outside. I also picked up the only cutting mat I could find. I wanted to have an extra, and I realized when I got it home, I don't need an extra. So if I am guesting at a big con this year, I did put in my application to be a guest at Toronto Comic Con, and I will for Hamilton and for Fan Expo as well. If I get chosen, I might bring this mat along with me, and I might do a giveaway. And it won't be, maybe we'll get some money for a charity or something. But I wanted to grab it just in case, something like that ever happened. So I picked up a good amount of stuff, and thankfully with my gift card, I didn't have to pay anything, which made everything even better. But yeah, it kind of sucks because I didn't have a whole ton of time to look around, but I picked up a bunch of stuff. So a good day of shopping for me. Let's get into the real news, the important stuff. This came out today, and I think this is something, if you've been a fan of the series, or the movie, more importantly, because a lot of people don't know about the other things about the series. There's been a lot of problems with Disney over the past couple decades where there are certain properties that they own that they have just left to rot and abandon. There are few instances when they come up into the ether of Disney, but overall, they could be making a ton of money off of it, but they just don't. And one of those properties is Roger Rabbit, from the great movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Well, recently, Gary K. Wolfe, who is the writer of the original Who Censored Roger Rabbit, which was a novel which kind of got adapted into Who Framed Roger Rabbit, has now gotten the rights back to the Roger Rabbit property from Disney. He was on a podcast, the I'm Not Bad podcast, and he announced that he has regained it from Disney. He's currently working on a sequel, so we will be getting a Who Framed Roger Rabbit sequel and a live-action Jessica Rabbit movie. And I think that any Disney fans have kind of admitted that is the one thing that Disney doesn't really know what to do with the Jessica Rabbit character, because it is such an overtly sexualized character, not just in the world of the movie, but in pop culture. It is, if you think of sexy cosplayers, that is a character that is kind of at the number one or number two most cosplayed characters. And so Gary came out and said, due to a 35-year copyright reservation clause designed to give original characters the ability to reclaim their rights to their original work after 35 years, he used that clause and Disney had to give it up. So yes, they will be making a new Who Framed Roger Rabbit movie and a live-action Jessica Rabbit movie. So who could that be? There are a ton of different actresses I could see in that role. I am personally more interested to see what they'll do with the Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He did say in the interview that they will be making sure that the quality of the original is mirrored in the new one. They will not be cutting any corners and trying to just make a cash grab. They want to make a true sequel to that movie. So I am excited. I'm a big fan of the Roger Rabbit franchise. I think that Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a cinema masterpiece. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with this. And I was one of those people who was like, man, I wish Disney could do something with this. But Disney kind of has a kid focus, so try to get something to adults is not the easiest thing in the world. On something great like that, we have to do the yin and yang and go to the other side, talking about something very crummy, depending on who you are. Some people are excited about this. Some people are very happy, especially if you're someone who goes to Comic-Con and sees these everywhere. Funko has announced in their earnings report that it is going to be a concern that they will be able to survive the next 12 months. They are in a lot of financial peril. They have around $241 million in loans and debts that they need to figure out a way to pay off. This may be the last year that we see new Funkos coming out. This is something I think we all kind of saw coming at one point or another. It sucks because this is a company that is, it kind of has become pop culture royalty over the past decade. I mean, especially in the past, I remember when Funko had a booth at Fan Expo Canada, and my buddy that was there, you had to line up at the Funko booth first thing in the morning to get a ticket to then show up later to get access to get the opportunity to buy the exclusives that were at the booth. He lined up in the morning, got a ticket, and then sold that ticket to somebody because he couldn't make it back to pick up the exclusives. So it is a big company with a lot of people employed, and with layoffs and stuff happening recently, it sucks to hear that another big company like that is falling. However, from an ethical standpoint, from a logical standpoint, it does not surprise me that Funko is in this type of peril, because you have a company that is literally making thousands of different things that they all have to sell well, and that's really tough. As of 2023, there are over 15,000 different Funko Pops. That's not including the tall vinyls. That's not including any other merchandise that they have. Simply Funko Pops, there's over 15,000 as of 2023, which means there's probably 16 to 17,000 now. So you're pumping out 16 to 17,000 different items. That's as they say in the business world, that is a wide breadth of a company, not a lot of depth. So you have to make 15,000 things and hope that they all sell pretty good. As we know with most of these Funko Pops, and it's a collector's item, so similar to trading cards, similar to shoes, similar to tons of other things. Only a certain percentage of those gain a lot of value. Most of them end up in Dollaramas or secondhand stores and stuff like that. So it does not surprise me that people are pumping out, or this company's pumping out thousands upon thousands, and they're not being sold, and they're ending up in Goodwills and such. So it sucks. I hope they can figure it out simply from a business standpoint, that I hope that's not a bunch more people being unemployed. I also feel bad and I feel good, because when something like this happens where the production will just stop, that could bump the value up in a bunch of Funko. So if there's people sitting on them, they might get a little more extra value if they try to sell it, or they're just all going to tank. And any money that was invested might hit zero. And that really is going to suck, because, as I said at the beginning, if you've been to a Comic-Con in the past decade, there are booths of Funko Pop sellers that are trying to get rid of their stuff. That those booths never seem to be empty by the end of the cons. So hopefully it works out. I sadly don't think it will, though. Another bit of sad news out there. If you are a Power Rangers fan like myself, we are losing the child, the thing that built the Power Rangers. The Japanese show Super Sentai, which is where the original Power Rangers got their footage from, is ending after 50 years. The series premiered in 1975, and due to production costs and a whole bunch more, they will not be continuing the series as of the end of this year. So after 50 years, any of the fighting that you've seen in the Power Rangers series, from the first episode all the way through to, I believe it was like 5 or 6, probably, I think it was about 2018 was when the Power Rangers shows just started doing everything in the US. They weren't taking Japan footage and manipulating it like they do. It's all gone. That's it. So it really sucks to see something like that end. I don't know how well it was doing in Japan. Like I said, it's a 50-year-old series, so I assume there was some ebbs and flows to it. I assume it wasn't just the best series ever every season. But yeah, it is kind of sad to see something like that kind of birthed a childhood fandom of mine of the Power Rangers is no longer going to be around. And I kind of, there was a little bit of me that felt similar to when certain actors pass away and you kind of go like, I swear I saw them, that they passed away 5-6 years ago. I thought this show ended a few years ago, like when the pandemic hit, it kind of shut everything down and they couldn't get it back going, but I guess they did, and it's unfortunately only lasted another 5 years. So sorry to Super Sentai. As I used to say on the show, we used to have a segment where we'd say thank you for the memories. To you, Super Sentai, thank you for the memories. You will be missed greatly. Okay, we got to have a little bit of fun. We go into the main event because this is something that I've wanted to see for a very long time. This is something that I remember going to my local video store. I used to have a local video store that was literally 5 streets over. And I used to go there. I started when I was probably 9, 10, up until literally the day I got married was like their last day in business, which was 2018. So this was my local store. I knew everything. I knew the owners. They knew me by name there. I remember seeing this box cover all the time, and it always interested me, but I never rented it. And then finally, because of my back, I was like, I need to watch a movie. And this cover came across my TV, and I went, this is my chance. I need to watch this. And that movie is American Psycho 2. Now, you're probably sitting there going, there was a sequel? Yes, there is a sequel to American Psycho. This is such a fun movie. This star, okay, so we all know, if you're a horror fan, you know Patrick Bateman from the American Psycho movie. He's a business guy. He goes on a killing spree. It's an amazing movie. If you've seen the video for Ice Nine Kills, where he's got the suit with the raincoat and the axe, that's American Psycho. This movie, American Psycho 2, has almost nothing to do with it. It is a sequel. However, after doing some research, and I had a feeling this was the case because I remember hearing about this back in the day, this movie was written as a completely different movie, and the studio got cold feet and decided we need to somehow attach this to a famous franchise. Hence, they changed it into an American Psycho sequel. Now, who would you see as the star of American Psycho 2? In American Psycho 1, we had Mr. Batman, Christopher Nolan's Batman. Why am I drawing a blank on his frickin' name? I keep saying Patrick Bateman, but it's not Patrick Bateman. Dark Knight. The Dark Knight. I know you're all typing in the chat going, Mike, you're an idiot. Christian Bale. Thank you. Christian Bale is Patrick Bateman, does an incredible job. The stars of this movie are Mila Kunis and William Shatner. So amazing casting, number one. The whole plot of the movie, the original movie, was Mila Kunis is kind of a psychotic girl who is in college, and she kills a bunch of people. What they rejigged into American Psycho 2, and this is where the beginning you could fall off, but it kept me engaged because it was a ballsy move. Mila Kunis is like 12 years old, and she is being babysat by another woman. The other woman takes Mila Kunis to go on a date with Patrick Bateman. Patrick Bateman kills the babysitter, and as he's cutting her up, Mila Kunis kills Patrick Bateman. So ballsy choice number one, that you're making a sequel and you kill the lead in the first 2 minutes. It wasn't even like a long scene. Mila Kunis then goes to college and she wants to join the FBI, and the only way to join the FBI is to become the teacher's assistant of William Shatner's character, who used to be on the FBI. There are 3 other people who are competing for that role. She ends up killing all 3. Is this a good movie? No. It is an interesting movie to watch, though, because there are choices that are made in this movie, not from an acting standpoint, that's kind of obvious, but from a directing standpoint of like, where are we going with this? That had me intrigued during the entire movie. There is a twist at the end, which I'm not going to spoil in case some one of you decides to watch it, but it is a really interesting movie to watch. The best scene, and I told Mr. David Thorne, who's been on the podcast about this, he's a big horror fan, and when I saw this, I told him about this scene. There is a moment where William Shatner's character has taken some drugs because he is dealing with a tragedy. He is in his office. He is drugged. Mila Kunis comes in and tries to seduce William Shatner. That in of itself is funny. The funniest thing, though, is while this is happening, if you close your eyes, you're literally, my mind went, Meg from Family Guy is now trying to seduce Captain Kirk. That's all I could hear. And it made the scene 10 times better. It is a very, very funny, like, what were you thinking type movie. It didn't do well. Mila Kunis and William Shatner have both been like, we wish we didn't do this movie. They both said they went in with a completely different movie and then they tried to make this American Psycho 2 thing work. So I'm so glad I saw it. It is now one of my favorite. You need to see this if you're a horror fan because it's just so weird and wacky. If you guys are still here, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you folks on TikTok are still here, you should hop over to YouTube, Corp Cosplay, if you want to be a part of the show, and comment like Boomster Joe, Akari, and Pretty Nerdy Crystal in chat, and Shinobi AFC. I appreciate you all still being here. We're gonna do a sponsor, and then we're gonna hit the main event. Sponsor, as always, you guys know this. The sponsor of the podcast is my beautiful, loving, incredible, amazing wife. She is always the sponsor. I would not be doing this without her. And that's just not me sucking up. I know there are people who are like, oh, man, I can't believe that. Seriously, I'm a better person because of my wife. I was a very different, and I'm not saying I'm a terrible person without her, but she has made me a better person. And because of that, she is my sponsor. I love you, hun. You'll always be my sponsor. Let's jump into the main event. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can tune in Monday nights, LIVE Live, 7 p.m. here on the channel, and you can be a part of the chat. Now, let's talk about comic book TV shows. So there's tons of options. There are tons of comic books that have made it to TV. However, we are going to keep these to live action. I do have another show that will be coming out that we're going to do at a later date that is comic book to animated, because if we add animated shows, we are going to be here forever. And we all know that number 1 and number 2 are going to be Batman the Animated Series and Spider-Man the Animated Series and X-Men 97. We know those will be the tops. So we're going to do that on a completely different episode. This is just going to be live action, because I feel like there are some of these shows that are I just don't feel get as much, I don't want to say don't get the respect they deserve, but they just don't get the love that they should. There's definitely a show on here that I remember everyone loving, and now nobody talks about. And it's just shocking. So we're gonna go through my list. There are definitely some on here that I've seen more episodes of than others. As I've said on the podcast many times, I am not a TV guy. I'm not a TV guy. I am not someone who watches every episode of everything. Most of these shows I've watched a season or 2 seasons of it, and I've seen clips of the rest of it. Let's jump into it. Let's jump into one that I think sort of kicked off kicked off a newer generation would come out on Tuesday nights. We would literally down in the basement. There were 6 of us, and we would watch the episodes live because we were so excited for the show. And that show was Arrow with Stephen Amell. This was a show that I was really excited about. It made it easier that a buddy of mine is a giant Oliver Queen fan, so that made him very interested in it. But I was also very interested in this because it was a character that I didn't think would do very well in TV. I mean, the Robin Hood type character has been done through history for years, and doing a modern take on it was just, I don't know. I really didn't expect a ton of it, but I really dug the first couple seasons of this. This was one that really showed a grittier tone, and I think that's something that made it stand out. There were other shows that were on at the time, and we're going to talk more about them later, but I feel like this one was the first one that kind of took that Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan, real, if heroes existed in the real world, and put it into a weekly TV show. We really enjoyed the first couple seasons of this. Shinobi in chat says Arrow was damn good for the first few years. And that's going to be a trend for almost all these shows, is that they were good for the first few years, and then you know what happens. This is another one that it really took advantage later on in the series of this whole shared universe. And I think that's something that really helped it with its show and its other shows, with Flash, with Supergirl, with what was the other one? There's DC Universe or something. That was another. There was like 4 or 5. We're not even going to get into Superman and Lois. This was the first one that sort of took those different shows and had very big crossovers. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people liked at the beginning, but then when you had such a great crossover and had so many great characters, DC and Warner Brothers being what they are, I think a lot of people thought, well, you have so many great characters on these TV shows. Why are you not incorporating them into the movies? Because at this point, DC was struggling. Like, we had The Dark Knight, we had these DC movies, but we didn't have anything like Marvel had. And I feel like Legends of Tomorrow, thank you. That's the other one I was thinking of. We had these great characters on TV, but they were not being brought over to film. And I feel like that was a sticking point for a lot of DC fans, because especially when you had something like The Flash come up and you had Grant Gustin, who was doing an incredible job on The Flash show, and you're like, well, just put Grant in the movie. Well, we wanted to keep these, 2 different things. And it just felt like such a frustrating thing. And also, with Arrow, and the part that I know a lot of the ladies out there liked, and some guys, it's 2025, I'm not going to say, this was Oliver Queen being a very human character and showing the training and the human skill behind it. If you've ever seen any trailers for this show, there is a shot of Oliver Queen doing the salmon ladder up the pole shirtless, and as soon as that scene came across, I just looked at my girlfriend and all the other girls in the room, and I went, there you go, there's your shot, enjoy, because I completely understand. But I think this was a great show. I think they did a good job for the first couple seasons. I remember watching season 1 and loving that they were introducing Deathstroke that early into the franchise. However, as with most of these TV shows, and I think this is the biggest problem that I have with these TV shows, is A, the episodes become long, but B, you kind of run out of series and stuff to do at about season 4 and 5. Because once you got into 4 and 5, we started to have a lot of crossovers, which means you had to keep up on the other shows. And you also had characters not make it, then they're back, then they don't make it, then they're back, then you start flip-flopping, and then, especially in this one, he's on the island, and then he's in the real world, then he's on the island, but he's never going back to the island, but now he's back on the island. It just became a lot to take in and a lot to remember from season to season. So unfortunately I dropped off. I think it was around season 3 or 4. I think he goes to Japan at one point, and that's where I was kind of like, this isn't for me anymore. Very funny Stephen Amell story, especially looking like this. If you've ever been to Fan Expo or any Comic Cons that Stephen Amell is at, I don't know how he is now, but back in the day when Arrow was really big, we had a thing in the volunteer world at Comic Con called Stephen Amell time. And Stephen Amell time meant Stephen Amell was probably going to be late. And not because of his, being a slacker or anything like that. Stephen Amell, great guy. Every time I've met him, every time I've talked to him, great guy. However, Stephen Amell has family and friends and other relatives because he's from Toronto. They all live in Toronto still. He doesn't, but he has friends and family that do. So he, instead of staying at a hotel with the other celebrities, he'd be like, save your money. I'll just stay with friends and family. It gives me time to see them. And sometimes he would end up walking to the con. Now, most celebrities, when they're walking down the middle of the street, will get noticed. And that will slow them down because people will want to stop and take photos and take autographs with them. Steven's choice was to wear a hood. Anybody see a problem if he wears a hood walking around? He looks even more like Arrow than if he had the hood off. So we always joke with him that it was always going to be Stephen Amell time because he would always be mobbed by people and he'd be like, man, they just know it's me because I have a hood on. And I'm like, yeah, because you wear a hood in the bloody show. That's probably why. So we always got a chuckle out of that, and he always laughs. But I liked Arrow. I thought it was a very good show. I thought, as with most shows, season 4 or 5 is when I kind of was like, all right, I think I've seen enough of this. And I know it went on for a lot longer. I'm not going to talk about Flash and Supergirl, but they're kind of all built in the same. There were people that love one more than the other. I never watched Supergirl. I watched a little bit of The Flash. But overall, it was a great sort of kicking off of this genre on the CW and getting the superhero name out into the universe again. We have Shinobi in chat saying, Boomster Joe said, Smallville was my show. You can say it is part of it, but barely. Shinobi said, it all became too much to keep up with. I quit all CW shows at the same time in 2018. Surprising, Marvel Studios didn't learn from it because they had the same mistakes. And that's the biggest problem. And I was someone back in the day where I loved all of these shows and I wanted to watch all of it, but it became such a burden to watch everything. You'd have Arrow, you had Flash, you had Supergirl, and then you had the Marvel shows, especially on Netflix. You had Daredevil, you had Jessica Jones, you had Luke Cage, you had Iron Fist. Like, it just became too much. I did not have the time to watch all of it. And that's kind of a similar problem that wrestling fans are having now, is that WWE has pretty much a show every single day on a different network or on YouTube or something, that it's just becoming too much to sort of keep up on. So viewership is dropping, and especially with technology now, unless something giant happens every single week, which we know it isn't, you can just check it out on, the highlights on X or on YouTube the next day, and you're not really missing much. Boomster Joe said Smallville is his show. Well, sir, this one is for you. Number 2 is Smallville. There are not many shows out there that I feel bad that I did not watch live. And this is one of them. This was a show that I completely slept on. And to be honest, I'm still sleeping on it because I still haven't watched this show really. It's funny. This is one of the funniest parts about working Comic-Cons and meeting celebrities. I've met half the cast of Smallville, and I'm just like, that's really cool that you're Supergirl and you're, Lex Luthor and all that. And I'm just like, I've never seen the show. And everybody's like, you've never seen Smallville, you're such a comic book fan. I completely agree. I completely agree. I love Michael Rosenbaum. What's his name? Tom Welland's great. I've never seen the show because it's now going to be a marathon for me to catch up with all 20 seasons of the show. Why Smallville? Well, I think this is the biggest thing about this show, and you can just look at it from the poster. If I said we're going to do a Superman show, the two things that have to happen is he's got to be in tights and he's got to fly. He doesn't do that in this show. There's no tights and there's pretty much no flights until later on in the series. And that's a pretty cool thing to think that you could pull off a show this well and just show the human side of Clark Kent. Yes, there is a little bit of superhero-ish in the background, but overall, this is a human story and a human show, and I think that's why it's worked so well, and it is such a loved fan base. Even having, and again, putting the no tights and no flying thing into effect, you also have so many mixed relationships. Again, I haven't watched this show in its entirety, but I know enough of it to know that like Clark Kent and Lex Luthor are best friends in this show, which is like, what? Like that, there's no way that would work. It completely works. It completely works in this show. To take such a strong rivalry like that and turn it on its head was a ballsy move. And I think for the hardcore fans of this show that have seen every episode and have met every one of them, they know how important this show is. But I don't think the general public remembers this show that well, and it doesn't get the credit it deserves. There was Michael Rosenbaum, who I actually really like his podcast, was talking to Tom about there was a recent top 20 or something CW shows, and Smallville's not on it. And he's like, we created that bloody channel. Like, what are you talking about? So I don't think this is remembered as fondly as the Flashes and the Supernaturals, which I know isn't a comic book, but those shows. But this one's the one that started it all. I think because it's so old that it started, I think, 2002, and it did last, I think, 8 seasons, I think. But it was so far removed that it kind of missed the boom of comic book TV shows that we had in that 2010 to 2020 ballpark area. Doesn't matter what Shinobi says, doesn't matter what you think about the show, Smallville is incredibly important. 100%. And again, I'm talking to someone who hadn't seen it. I've never, up until I started working at Comic-Cons and I ended up running into these guys and people, not even just fans, but other friends of mine who work Comic-Cons are like fawning over these guys, like, oh my God, it's the best show ever. And I'm like, I feel like I missed the boat on this. And I did. But watching little bits of it here and there and seeing clips of it, I'm like, okay, I get why this is such a big show. And again, every member of the cast that I've met is incredible. I love that Michael Rosenbaum will just walk around cons like unattended. He'll just go for walks. And I remember he was at Niagara. Yeah, he was at Niagara last year or the year before. And I just had to run and grab something, and I'm walking back up, and Rosenbaum's just like talking and like shopping, and I'm just like, hi Lex. And he's like, hey man. I just kept walking. I'm like, this is such a cool job to just like Michael Rosenbaum just casually hanging out talking nerd stuff with other nerds. So yeah, this is a great show, and again, this is one that I've not seen a ton of, but I totally understand why everyone loves it as much as they do. Let's talk about, we've talked DC, we've talked Arrow, we've talked Smallville. This is the show that I think a lot of people think of when they think of the first Marvel TV shows. I disagree, and we'll talk about the show that I believe beats this one, but Daredevil. I think this is the one that everyone kind of goes, oh, this is when Marvel shows got good. if people think Arrow had a gritty Christopher Nolan tone, Daredevil had that tone, but threw the comic book elements more into it, and man, did it rock. I loved the first 2 seasons of this show. Third one was okay. I still haven't seen the new one. I didn't really like the first episodes. But this was such a good show. The dark street level feel of this show was exactly what we needed in a comic book show. This was one that you could eat. Daredevil's such a fun character because he's got that. He's kind of like Spider-Man, but doesn't have the Spider-Man crazy villains. He's pretty much all street level stuff. And I feel like when you probably talk to executives who aren't comic book fans and you explain that, they probably get kind of apprehensive because, you don't have, the big Doc Ock, you don't have the big Thanoses like you do in the big Marvel characters. But man, you can do a lot with this character, and they did. Really showing off, even just in this photo. This is a promotional photo, one of the first ones, and just seeing the brutality on him of like, hey, I still got court in the morning, but man, I got a gouge. My knuckles are beat up. I got a split lip. I had a bad night. And probably the other guy looks a lot worse. And again, this is a character that I think a lot of executives probably have a tough time understanding the popularity of this character, because this is a blind lawyer in New York City. Like, that's a tough. This is kind of close to the TMNT. Like, I'm gonna do a cartoon about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What? That doesn't make any sense. And when you talk about this one, this is a blind lawyer who fights crime in New York City. What? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, kid who wears a spider costume and swings around New York, okay, I can kind of get that. Avengers who go up against Earth's mightiest villains, I get that. But a blind lawyer? What? And we're going to do a gritty version of it? Huh? But Netflix was so smart. And they went, yep, here's all the money. Go make a show. And with Matt Murdock's character being so internally, having such internal conflict, is actually a very good character. And they did a great job in the first couple seasons, really in the first one, of showcasing that, the conflict that he goes through about being a Catholic and having that understanding of his faith while also having to do some pretty brutal things to the bad guys in Hell's Kitchen in New York City. And I think they really focused on that a lot. That is one of the few things. I personally like the Ben Affleck movie. It is cheesy. It is corny. I don't care what anyone says. Michael Clark Duncan is still one of the best Kingpins. But I do feel like it was a very superhero movie that didn't really showcase that morality problem that Matt Murdock deals with. It does a little bit, but not really. And I feel like this had the time to really delve into that, and that made you feel for that character of that conflict. And like, can you not think of the fight scene in the hallway when you think of this show? Of doing an incredible one shot, and I'm going to air quote one shot, because if you actually watch it, there is a cut or two. A one shot hallway fight scene. Like, that's something that technically, and I've never been in the industry, but I have shot student films and stuff like that. Trying to shoot a one shot like that, even when there are cuts, is a nightmare to produce. It is such a pain in the ass. So for them to go through and do a fight like that and have other ones throughout it, I mean, I know in the new season where he fights Bullseye in the first episode, very similar fight scene. It is a logistical nightmare trying to get that to work properly, and them being able to pull that off and pull it off so well that unanimously Comic book fans applauded, and I think that's something that is very hard, especially nowadays. They killed it. They did a great job on this show, and I feel like it is when Marvel announced they were going to bring some of the Netflix shows back, I feel like if this wasn't number one, I feel like you'd have a lot of very frustrated fans because this was the one that everyone wanted. The new season, hit and miss from what I've heard. Like I said, I've seen the first episode. I have said it here on the podcast. I feel if you are a very political person, you will not like this season from what I've seen in the first episode. From what I've seen, it wasn't written that way. It wasn't to mirror what's going on in the world, but if you are very political, it could stir up some issues. I've just, like I said here earlier, and I've said 100 times, I'm just not a TV person. Sitting down for hours upon hours upon hours is very frustrating. I can't do it. I get very bored very easily. Boomster Joe in chat says Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. There's no acting there. He just owns the role 100%. And I love Vincent D'Onofrio because I am a big Law and Order fan from not SVU, Criminal Intent. He's actually, and funny enough, we're talking about Comic-Con stories. When he was at Fan Expo 3 years ago, he was just walking down the street with his wife late one night. I was coming back from dinner with some friends, and he was just walking down the street. And he didn't look like he was having a bad night, but looked like he was in it looked like they were having a very deep conversation, him and his wife. So I did not want to stop him, but boy, did I want to fanboy and be like, you were amazing as Kingpin, but oh my God, Law and Order. But really nice guy from what I've seen and whatever. I've had people that have worked with him and they've all said he's a sweet, sweet guy. So if you're ever wanting to meet Charlie or Vincent D'Onofrio, please spend the time and the money. They're both very, very, very nice people. We're going to jump into a show that, let me just triple check one thing. I just want to make sure that all my photos are in order. They are perfect. Okay, there we go. We're going to jump into a show now. This is the one that I've probably seen the least of. It is not a show for me. I have read the books a couple of the books back in the day, but I know there is a giant fan base for it, so I feel like this should be on the list, even though I personally, due to just the way the world is right now, I don't want to watch this, but I should because I'm a comic book fan, and that is The Boys. This is probably a series that I thought would get a season, but they did such a good job with this that I think they're on season 4 or 5 now. They're killing it with this. Again, I've not watched it simply because of the world that we live in. I feel it leans a little too political for me. And it's not because of my political beliefs. I'm not getting into a political debate about this. I just want a show nowadays or a movie that's a little more uplifting. And I feel like this is something that very much focuses on the villains and what they do. And it just gets a little too down for me. And we'll talk about that a lot more when we get to the last show on this list. But yeah, they've done such a good job. If you're into that, the social and political satire is top of mind for this. You can tell even by the poster here that this is something that they lean very heavily on. How the soups in the show to the world one way of living, and really behind the scenes they're a lot worse people. Marcy in chat says The Boys is insane. Carl Urban is brilliant. Carl Urban is brilliant in... Sorry, my nose is itchy. Carl Urban is insane in everything he does. Like, Carl Urban is amazing. I'm kind of regretting that I didn't wear my Judge Dredd cosplay last time he was at Toronto Comic Con, because I am such a big fan of his Dredd. This show, as I said, takes the sort of shock factor and the gore and the dark comedy and all that really to the extreme. It really pushes the envelope. Even in the first episode that I've seen, having the girlfriend get run over like within the first 2-3 minutes of the show kind of sets the tone for the rest of the series. People that, the Homelander, the love for Homelander, having him be a character in the new Mortal Kombat. There are fans of that character. I'm not a big fan at this point in my life to be promoting the villain as such a great character, but that's just me. If you love it, enjoy it, keep watching, because if there's more TV, or if there's more comic book TV shows, they'll make more. I do know that they have changed some things in the show than what was written in the books. There has, obviously, the gore and stuff has been increased. The Homelander character is a little different than it is in the comic books. I haven't read the comic books in years. I read them back when I was in high school. But it's a good series. It's just not the series for me, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I know there are a lot of people out there who think that if it's not exactly what they want, then it is the worst show in the world. There are a lot of things in this world that aren't for you, that aren't for me, and that's perfectly fine. I know a lot of people love this series. It is definitely pushing the envelope, and a lot of people like that, especially from the Game of Thrones audience. And again, we'll talk about another series that does that further down the list. It is very important that we have shows like this. Like I said, it's just not for me. So we've gone from The Boys, we've talked about Daredevil, we talked about Smallville, we talked about Arrow. I mentioned earlier that Daredevil was kind of the show that everyone thinks Marvel TV. This was the show that blew the doors open. Marvel has amazing TV shows. Because of that, we got Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist, which we won't talk about because it was crap, and The Defenders, and then that kind of sprung into the Marvel universe now, where you've got Miss Marvel and you've got Loki and all these amazing shows. But there was a show back in the day that Marvel gave us that a lot of people forget about and a lot of people sleep on. And I'm kind of ashamed about that, because this was a good show. But I guess it was too long ago. And it's similar to Smallville. And that was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. This was a good show. And I know there are a few people that are like, oh, it got so boring after a while. Again, I watched the first couple seasons of this. I specifically watched the Ghost Rider season. This wasn't a bad show. It really wasn't. And I feel like a lot of people kind of shit on this now because it's not Daredevil. It's not gritty. It's not in the MCU anymore, which Coulson is in the MCU, by the way. But there are so many people. I've seen so many people who are just like, oh yeah, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm like, really? That's the response? No. I'm glad we're getting some love in chat. Boomster Joe, Pretty Nerdy Crystal, Shinobi, and Marcy all are saying that it was a good show. And I agree. I've just seen a few too many comic book fans who are like, yeah. And I'm like, nah, shut up. This was the first show that was directly intertwined with the MCU. Like, Coulson comes out of the, if spoilers on Avengers, if you haven't seen the first Avengers movie, Coulson dies, and then the show starts and he's alive, and we're like, what happened? And that's kind of the overarching story through the first season. And that's kind of the first time that Marvel dipped their foot into, let's take this movie world and see how it does on TV. And I feel like that should be applauded. Now we kind of are oversaturated with stuff. I will fully admit that. Disney's kind of gone a little nuts with it. But back in the day, it wasn't that bad. This also gave Marvel a little bit of an opportunity to give some highlights to some characters that normally wouldn't get featured. And I feel like that is a benefit. We had... it's a lot easier to put a non-big character, maybe a C-level character, into an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of putting a whole bunch of hope that this new character is going to do well in a movie. Prime example, Ghost Rider is in season 5, I believe, and it's the Robbie Reyes version. It is not the motorcycle, it is the car Ghost Rider. So having him come into this movie and go, okay, there's an audience that likes this Robbie Reyes character. Let's keep him on a shelf, and if we need to use him later, we can bring him back. And I'm hoping, as much as I would love to see that guy going out in a blaze of glory on the motorcycle, I am a little more intrigued to see if they bring Robbie Reyes into the new Avengers and how they're going to bring in Secret Wars and all that. I would be very interested to see if they bring that version in. And this was a team movie, or a team show. And I think that's something that gets kind of lost. I feel like this was a show that was centered around Coulson, but by the end you were able to fall for all the different characters. And I think I wish Disney did a little more with these characters. I know because of the rights problems, because this wasn't a Disney show, they couldn't really do anything with it. It was but I feel like now that everyone's kind of playing together, I think we could bring some of these characters back. And will they get a big round of applause like, Blade got in Deadpool and Wolverine and stuff? No, but I feel like we could have some introductions of Tremor, I believe her name became, and some other characters from it. So I think this should get a little more love, especially with Marvel wanting to bring back the whole thought process now with Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars, and having all these old characters come back. I would like to see at least one or two of them show up in the movies just to give that little remember us. And I think there are a lot of people that will once they see them. So we've gone through a lot of modern shows, but it would not be a list if we didn't go back to the old days, the old school days, where the whole world of Batman and the whole world of DC kind of, I would say more Batman. I don't know how much of a crossover they had in these shows, but especially the Batman universe kind of got a lot of its understanding of the general public. And that's the Batman 66 show. And I think this is something that, I always feel bad for someone like Adam West. He played Batman and was loved as Batman. And yes, I will fully admit this is a campy show. But I feel like when they became more gritty, when the Frank Miller version of Batman came into the world, I feel like a lot of people crapped on him as Batman. And that sucks because he did such a good job, and Burt Ward too as Robin. But this was a very classic TV show. I've talked many times in the past about this, that I'm not a big fan of the Christopher Nolan universe, especially The Dark Knight, because I feel like it's a little too gritty for me. But personally, this was my first Batman. When I grew up, my mom's boyfriend at the time was a big comic book fan. That's kind of how I got into comics, was he would take me to the comic book store, and he would watch the Batman 66 show, and I would sit there and just be in awe of this show. I would watch intently, trying to learn all of the different villains of the week that Batman and Robin would fight, and Batgirl, even on the Batgirl episodes. This was a great adaptation of that 50s and 60s version of Batman. Again, is it the Dark Knight Frank Miller? No. But it's not supposed to be. This is a Silver Age version of him. And this is, again, I understand this is a campy show. 100% it's a campy show. I've always said, if you can watch this, you can watch Batman and Robin. And they take this comic book feel to the next level, including the zoinks and pals and bangs. It is the most comic book type movie or comic book show that ever existed, because you literally had the pow bangs on the screen. Shinobi said, "It's funny how Myers feels about The Dark Knight is how I feel about Batman 89 and Returns. Never liked him. Never liked the Michael Keaton Batmans." Wow, that's interesting. I can see why. I can see that I can see that there are elements of that are a little too much. They're a little too. I am not a big Tim Burton fan. There are barely any Tim Burton movies that I like. So if you're not a Tim Burton fan, there's a lot to not like about those movies. So there's a lot of his aesthetics in it, especially the second one, especially in Returns with Penguin and all that. Hi, we are not divorced. And with the Batman 66, we can't talk about Batman 66 without the Rogues Gallery. The Rogues Gallery in the 66 show really kind of cemented the world's understanding of Batman and his universe. You know, there is a reason why your grandma knows who the Joker is. There's a reason why your grandma knows who Egghead is and all these obscure villains. It's because of this show. And are some of them closer to the comic books than others? 100%. But no, the Riddler has the question mark tuxedo because of this question mark suit jacket because of this show. He has the bowler hat because of this show. There are elements of those characters that became pop culture understanding because of this show. And I feel it gets the just that it should, but it influenced a lot more than I think a lot of people realize. My nose is super itchy for some reason. Gotta stop the cocaine habit. Shinobi said, I like Keaton, but didn't like Batman killing in those movies, especially the first. I agree. But I do like the aesthetics and the music, and we don't get Batman the animated series without the Tim Burton joints. 100% we do not get the animated series without those Batman movies. We got one more show left, and we are out of here, folks. We know we're running a little bit late. I got to get out of here soon because we got Monday Night Raw tonight. It is John Cena's last Raw tonight, so stay in for a few more minutes, and then we're going to get you out of here. Last show, one that I think a lot of people forget is a comic book movie, if you're not a comic book fan. One that I enjoyed the first season of, actually over near the first 2 seasons of, and then I kind of fell off about this because we all know what the ending is going to be. Because even if you're not a comic book fan and you haven't read the book, you know what the ending is. Because there's only one ending to this type of series, and that is The Walking Dead. Walking Dead runs into the same problem that all zombie shows and movies run into, and that is everyone's going to die sooner or later. Like, there's no way, like, there are very, 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 very few properties that are zombie based that anyone survives or that there's a cure. It's always a fight to stay alive, and at the end, they don't. So I enjoyed the first season of this. I enjoyed the second season of this. But then I kind of hit that point of like, well, we all know what's going to happen in the end. Like, Boomster Joe, The Walking Dead made zombies mainstream again. That's legacy. Yeah. Wait, this is a comic book series? Yes, it's a comic book series. It's an Image Comics. Yes, this is a comic book series. Yeah, it's the same. And by the way, some other ones you may not realize are comic book series. The Mask starring Jim Carrey is a comic book series. That most people don't realize that's a comic book movie. It is such a comic book movie. It's one of my favorites, actually. This is a very character-verse driven show. You are so interested in where these characters are going to go. Walking Dead was really good at investing you in the lives of these characters. And that is something that I cannot crap on. They took these characters and made you feel like you were those characters, and if something happened to those characters, you were going to lose your mind, kind of like Game of Thrones with the Red Wedding. When that stuff happens, you were emotionally invested into it, and if something happened, you lost all of it. It was yeah, Crystal. You had so many good iconic characters come out of this, especially characters like Negan, and I read the books when I read a couple of the books when I was in high school. And I read the books with Negan in it. I never would have thought Negan would have been a character that is taken off like it did. But this show was what made him a household name. It's very hard to be walking around with a barbed wire nailed ball bat without thinking of Negan because of this. And he has been in other properties. He's been in a bloody Tekken game. He's been that popular. So, the faithful designs of the characters, the understanding of the characters, they did such a good job with that. They have changed some things though, based on the book. Keeping Carl alive was one that I was kind of like, oh, that's a little different. But there is still the sense of danger, the sense of unpredictability with this show, which I think is something that worked very well for this show But I feel like later on in the series, they kind of pushed it to a limit where I didn't enjoy it. And I think a lot of people started to fall off with it. Either, like I said at the beginning, you kind of get 4 or 5 seasons out of a show, and then you kind of hit that wall of like, now what do we do besides put these people in peril again? And I think that's kind of where we got to this series. And it's still going on, I think. There's spinoffs of this show. Overall, I thought it was a good series. I know it's hugely popular. I know there are tons of people who still love the show, even the spinoffs. But as was it Shinobi said earlier? Shinobi? Yeah. Boomster said The Walking Dead made zombies mainstream again. And that is the truth. This just opened up the zombie world again, which I'm kind of glad we've gotten to the point that it's over. Because it's gotten a little too flooded in the zombie market. I'm glad we kind of went a different direction in that. But overall, these are some of the best TV shows that started out as comic books. Again, we are going to do another episode later on where it is going to be talking about animated shows. I greatly appreciate you guys sticking around. I appreciate you guys staying a little long. We're a little longer than we usually do. If you can hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, all those things that we always ask you here on the YouTubes. Next week is the 17th. We are going to be talking about a fun personal episode. If you're a cosplayer out there, you can probably say that Halloween was kind of the thing that got you into cosplay. I think that's sort of across the board. A lot of cosplayers would say that. I was one of those. And we're going to do something fun next week. I am going to go to my mom's this week, and I'm going to raid her photo album, and I'm going to find as many photos of myself as a kid dressed up for Halloween. And I'm going to show you what the costumes I had when I was a kid, and sort of boomed the cosplayer in me. And what started out as a little fun skeleton when I was, believe, 4 or 5, now I walk around in this giant thing on my head. So next week it's going to be cosplaying as a kid. I'm going to show you some photos of the costumes that I was given and my mom made for me when I was little. We're going to talk about that and kind of go down memory lane. Then after that, we're going to talk a little bit about Borderlands, and we're going to talk about the fun of the Borderlands franchise, because Borderlands 4 is out, and hopefully I'll be playing that this Christmas. But until then, I'm going to let you guys get out of here. I appreciate it. Hit that like button, hit that share button, subscribe, and all those things. Have yourselves a good night. I will talk to you very soon. I love you all, and I'll see you soon. Take care, guys. Hey, thanks for watching Monday Night Nerd. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the subscribe button, like this content, and follow on social media for even more nerdy fun. See you soon.